Today, we're going to focus on demographics, behaviors, lifestyles of Hispanic consumers. What sets them apart from non-Hispanic consumers, and what distinguishes different types of Hispanic consumers from one another. Primarily through the lens of acculturation. We'll also talk a little bit about language usage and country of origin, but we don't address the Hispanic market as one big monolithic segment. It breaks down in many different ways, and we're going to look at some of the differences in behaviors and attitudes and lifestyles that correspond to those segments. Claritas does a lot of segmentation. That's what we're known for. Primarily for industry-specific segments like cycle and connections. But with the acquisition of Geoscape, we now have a multicultural dimension to almost everything we do: demographic research, behavioral research, and segmentation as well. We're going to focus today on this segment of our practice, culture coding, which includes not just identifying Hispanics, but segmenting them by, for example, level of acculturation. We call our Hispanic acculturation system Hispanicity. I'm not going to get into a lot of details of this because it's not a sales presentation. The only reason I'm showing it is because we're going to show a lot of data that breaks out Hispanics along these segments. On the left, we have thoroughly acculturated Americanizado. These are third and beyond generation in the US. HA2 is the children of immigrants. So they're second generation, first born in America. To all the way on the right, you have recent immigrants come here within the last 10 years, primarily Spanish dependent, Spanish cultural practices. These are people who have immigrated more than 10 years ago. And here in the middle, you have a very interesting segment that we call bicultural and bicultural. These are completely bilingual, but also bicultural. People are comfortable in an Anglo setting, in a Hispanic setting, in English and in Spanish, and moving back and forth fluidly within the same conversation, back and forth. The interesting thing about this segment is you're not born into it. You either acculturate into it from the right side of the spectrum, or you retro-acculturate into it from the left side of the spectrum. So although it's not the largest, HA2 is the largest, it is the fastest growing segment. The trend is absolutely towards biculturalism and bilingualism. And we'll see as we look at some of the behaviors and the lifestyles, what significance that has going forward. I did mention country of origin. It's another important factor. We're not going to talk a whole lot about that today, but we also look at country of origin through the lens of acculturation. And just to give you an example, you can see the difference between Cuban Americans and Puerto Ricans. Puerto Ricans, the more acculturated segments are the red and orange ones here, and the less acculturated ones are the blue ones, the darker blue ones. You can see only about 13% of Puerto Ricans are in the less acculturated segments, but more than a third of the Cubans are in the less acculturated segments, likewise with the red and blue. Long more than half, more than 60% of Puerto Ricans are in the most acculturated segments, and less than half of the Cuban Americans are in the less acculturated segments. This is nationally. We can look at these metrics locally as well, market by market. There's some interesting differences. We also look at language usage in a vacuum, but today we're going to focus more on acculturation. The interesting thing about our acculturation model, it accounts for language and language usage and language preference, but it's far more determined by where you were born. If you weren't born in the US, how old were you when you came here? Did you go through the primary and secondary education systems here? This is how people acculturate, whether they're Hispanic or any other race or ethnicity, by going through our education system. It's the primary way to acculturate. It's not the only way, but it's the primary way people acculturate. These are just some of the dimensions of our identity graph, which is the basis for most of the research we're going to show today. You can see we have a lot of information about households, about people in the US, behavioral, demographic, lifestyle, attitude, and also lots and lots of cultural data. So I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here, and you've probably seen some of these numbers before, but I'm going to run through them quickly because these are based on the most recently released data from the Census Bureau, based on the redistricting data set they released in the third quarter of last year. And the numbers are pretty stark. You have 137 million, almost 138 million multiculturals in the US. That's over 40% of the population already today, and growing. All the growth is coming from multicultural segments at this point in time. All. The non-Hispanic white segment is getting smaller and smaller every day, and the other segments are all growing. Of the multicultural segments, Hispanics are by far the largest, greater than 19% already, almost 20%, and growing, of course. As you go into generations, you can say that millennials are almost 25% Hispanic already. And as you get into the next generation and the next generation, they're going to become more and more Hispanic and less non-Hispanic white. Hispanics grew 82% since the 2000 census. That's an incredible growth rate over a 20-year period. And of all the growth in the US since then, more than half of it comes from Hispanics. And going forward, that number is only going to go up. Now, I should caution you that these numbers are from our 2022 and 2027 series. Claritas updates the census data every year and creates 5-year projections. And these are based on the numbers that were released, as I said, in the third quarter of last year, which was basically the only census data we've actually seen so far. Now, recently, you probably seen the decennial mea culpa from the Census Bureau, admitting that once again, they undercounted Hispanics and other multicultural groups, but Hispanics at 5%, which is more than double the usual rate. And so we're working on our new updated projections for 2023 and 2028 now, and you'll see these numbers dramatically increase, not just from a year of growth, but for our attempts to correct for the undercount. And so when you see statistics like these, we like to present them this way. You can see here 2010 numbers, current year, and 5-year projections. You can see all the growth coming from Hispanic. You can see the non-Hispanic white was basically flat for the last 10 years, 12 years, and going down. Yep. Here, during the course of this presentation, 1 hour, goes well, there'll be 140 more Hispanics in the country by the end of the presentation than there were at the beginning, and around 20 less non-Hispanic whites. That's just per hour. You can see them per day, per month, per year. These numbers will be even more dramatic when we update them to correct for the most recent undercount by the Bureau. Basically, the bottom line, all the growth is coming from multicultural segments, and most of that is coming from Hispanics going forward now and in the future. It's a pretty compelling case. Not only is the growth coming from Hispanics, but if you look at the other demographics, Hispanics are on average 9 to 10 years younger than non-Hispanics. What does this mean? Well, among other things, it means they have more lifetime spending ahead of them than behind them, right? And certainly more lifetime spending ahead of them than any other group. We took life expectancy statistics from CDC. We created some of our own consumer spending models based on consumer expenditure surveys produced by Bureau of Labor Statistics, broke them out by race and ethnicity. In orange, you see the Hispanic spending, average household remaining lifetime. Okay, this is total consumer spending by each household over their lifetime. And the dark blue is non-Hispanic white, and red here is non-Hispanic black, light blue is non-Hispanic Asian, and orange is Hispanic. So you can see that because they have more years of spending left than other groups, there's more spending going on. This is per household. What does this mean? If you can cater your products and services to Hispanics and attract them as loyal customers and retain them over their lifetimes, you're going to get more years of spending out of them as you are out of non-Hispanic customers. Plain and simple, that's what this graph shows. For certain categories, you're not going to have to wait till the end of their lives to get that more spending. Hispanics spend more than non-Hispanics on selected categories and subcategories. Food is a good example. Food at home, food away from home. It's driven primarily by the size of Hispanic households. They are on average significantly larger than non-Hispanic households. Why? They're more likely to have kids, they're more likely to have more kids, and they're more likely to be multi-generational. So all that adds up to significantly more people per household on average than non-Hispanic households. That means more food, more food spending, more food consumed. So you can see the orange line already outspending the other groups in the near future, and certainly in the long term. Food away from home, well, I don't think I've seen any data that show that Hispanics have a preference for quick service restaurants more than other groups. I think this is just families with children have a preference for quick service restaurants. They're on the run, they're going here, they're going there, they're picking the kids up at school, they're taking them to swimming or soccer or whatever. And quick service restaurants becomes part of that routine. It's already the case that Hispanics on average are spending more per household on quick service restaurants than any other group. And that difference is only going to magnify in the future going forward. As you can well imagine, apparel is another category where this is the case. Any of you who have kids will probably admit that you're spending more on clothing for your kids than you're on yourselves. I know I am. I have too. And you know how it goes. The spending on clothing is driven by presence of children. These are not the only categories that Hispanics outspend others for. These are just some examples. We have lots of others. We have these data for hundreds of categories and subcategories. And I can tell you there's plenty of them where Hispanics as a function of lifetime value are the most attractive customers to have. That of course assumes that you can retain them as loyal customers over time. We're going to talk about what it takes to do that going forward. Claritas fields a number of our own surveys. One of them is Technology Track. It's focused primarily on consumer electronics and telecommunications. We survey all households, but for the purposes of the presentation today, we broke them down by race and ethnicity. So you'll see things comparing Hispanics to other groups. In all those cases, white, black, Asian, we're talking about non-Hispanic, white, black, and Asian, right? Those are races, and Hispanic is an ethnicity, but we've crossed them and deduplicated so that when we talk about Hispanics, now we're talking about all Hispanics, and when we talk about the other groups, it's non-Hispanic white, non-Hispanic black, non-Hispanic Asian. You're going to see a lot of charts like this. The bars represent percent of respondents, and the red line here with these points represent an index, which compares the percent being represented in the bar, in this case for Hispanics, to the percent for everybody, right? Total, not non-Hispanic, but everybody. So 81% of Hispanics have at least one mobile phone in the household. Why is this significant? Well, throughout the course of this presentation, you're going to see that mobile phones are the key to reaching Hispanics and the key to servicing them and keeping them happy. Hispanics love their mobile phones. There are 78% more likely even to have a mobile phone primarily used by a child. That's over here. It's about 17% of Hispanic households have at least one phone in use by a child. And another 17% have 3 phones in the household, and another almost 20% have 4 or more mobile phones in the household. If you're a mobile phone provider, this Hispanic household is a bonanza for you. But if you're any kind of brand or service offering an app or communication, you need to be in the mobile space. You need to be in the mobile space if you're going to attract a Hispanic customer. Less than 26% of Hispanic households have a landline. Now, so they're cord cutters. Everybody's a cord cutter these days, but Hispanics are way ahead of the curve, right? US households in total, it's about 37.5% have a landline. So Hispanics are way ahead. I can also tell you we're looking very closely at cord cutting behavior for television and for internet. As 5G becomes more and more popular, we're noticing a general trend, but especially among Hispanics, of cord cutting. People are dropping their cable TV provider, dropping their internet service provider, and going 100% mobile 5G. That'll become interesting too as we move forward, and we will probably do a whole nother series on that as we watch that trend more carefully next time. So Hispanics may love their phones, their mobile phones, but not so much their providers. Okay, about 30% of Hispanic households switched mobile providers in the last year. That's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot more than the national average. And less than half of Hispanic households would rate their mobile providers as good or very good. That's low. It's much lower than average. Now, who has done a good job? T-Mobile has done a good job, primarily through their purchase of Metro, right? Metro PCS did an excellent job catering their products and services to Hispanics. They had a very high index. I live in Miami, and I can tell you that there's stores in all over the Hispanic neighborhoods, and they're lined up out the door. Now, T-Mobile acquired Metro, and they've done a fine job of converting Metro customers over to straight T-Mobile plans, such that when you combine the two, they have about a third of the Hispanic market, 32%, according to our research. So they're doing very well. Everybody else, not so much, except for maybe Boost and Cricket in terms of index, but the percents are so low as to be barely significant. How do they do it? Well, our research shows that bundling services in with your mobile plan is a very attractive thing for Hispanics. Obviously, international calling, especially to Mexico, is a no-brainer, but also things like HD video streaming. When it's bundled as a package, you don't pay extra for each megabyte, right? That attracts a lot of people, but it attracts Hispanics disproportionately so. This is the index for Hispanic. This is 50% above average. In other words, Hispanics are 50% more likely to have a mobile plan that includes high HD video streaming. They're 150% more likely to have a package that includes calling to Mexico or even internationally, well above average. Now, we break it down and look at it by acculturation. Anytime we do this, you're going to see the most acculturated over here and the least acculturated on the right over here, just like it was when we showed you the Hispanicity slide. Red is HD video streaming, orange is international calling to Mexico, and light blue is just general international calling. You can see what's driving this here is the bicultural and unculturated Hispanics are absolutely, almost universally taking calling plans that include talk, text, and data to Mexico. HA4, which is the less acculturated Hispanics, are 5 times more likely to have that as a package, as a feature in their mobile package. Now, we said that Hispanics are cord cutting more than most, but those that still have television services, the red are bars for cable TV, and orange are for satellite, which is still popular among Hispanics, particularly among bicultural and less acculturated Hispanics. What are they packaging? Yeah, foreign language, international TV, international sports, Mexican soap operas, programming from home, basically. If it's packaged in, it's going to be more attractive to Hispanic households. I think that this trend is going down, and this is all moving toward the mobile and tablet space. What else? Well, we talked about HD video streaming, and this is particularly streaming on smartphones. Almost 2/3, 66% and change, of Hispanic households say they watch TV and or movies on their smartphones. That's compared to 42% for the national average. That's a huge difference, huge. Netflix, nearing saturation among Hispanics, 70%. Disney, well, some of that is content. Disney has recently released some pictures that are clearly targeted at the Hispanic market, but it's households with children, it's families, right? That's where Disney's at. 40% more likely, almost, Hispanic households to subscribe to Disney Plus than non-Hispanic, or than the general market. Other things, other streaming services, Hulu, again, cord cutters, right? HBO Max, not bad. Amazon Prime, it looks like a high number, but it's actually below average. So there's still room here for them to grow their Hispanic market. Social media. I know this is a bit of an eye chart. There's another one here that'll make it a little clearer. This one is comparing the different race and ethnic groups for various different social media platforms based on intensity of usage. So there's 3 for Facebook, 3 for Instagram, 3 for Snapchat, 3 for TikTok, 3 for Twitter. What you're seeing here is that Hispanics over-index everybody for moderate usage on Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok, right? This is here is heavy usage of TikTok among Blacks. It's about the only thing that they beat Hispanics on. And YouTube, a little bit on YouTube. Here now, this is just Hispanic. Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. You can see here in this space, these are the indexes. This is all Hispanics for 1 hour a week, 2 to 4 hours a week, 3 to 5 hours a week, 6+ hours a week. Very, very heavy social media for Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. Also over here, you can see this is YouTube, 1 to 2 hours a week, 3 to 5 hours a week, 6+. You add them up and you find 56% of Hispanic households are on YouTube at least 1 hour a week. That's an incredible statistic. 56% on YouTube at least 1 hour a week. Where is it coming from? This is by acculturation segment again, and you can see real clearly where it's coming from. It's coming from the bicultural and unacculturated Hispanics. They're not on Twitter, but they're very heavily on Snapchat, on TikTok, on Insta, and on YouTube. Right? HA1s, highly acculturated Hispanics, they're a little above average, but for the most part, they're behaving like the general market in social media. Podcasting, another place you're going to reach Hispanics, extremely popular. These are different formats, genres, if you will, of podcasting. Basically, what the red line is telling you is that Hispanics over-index for all of them, especially kids and family, education, health and fitness, music. News and comedy are also very popular, but the index is nowhere near as strong as it is for these other categories. But they over-index for all podcasting. Hispanics love podcasting. Now, what is this telling us? It's telling us that they're probably listening to podcasts in Espanol because the bicultural and unacculturated Hispanics are what's driving. This is for kids and family, but if we look at health and fitness, it's almost the same pattern. Yeah. So you're going to advertise on podcasting, and we can tell you that's a very good way to target your audience and measure very precisely response, attribution, lift. We have a whole practice dedicated to that. Spanish language podcasts are an excellent way to reach Hispanic audiences. Okay, I'm going to move on now and talk a little bit about banking, financial track. It's another survey we do. It's the largest, longest running survey of financial services in the country. We've been doing this since the 80s. We ask a lot of questions about where people bank and what banking products and services they use, what financial products they use that aren't with banks, to get a pretty good 360-degree picture of where financial services are being used, where they're not being used, who's using them, sometimes why. You've probably seen this before. You might have even seen it yesterday if you tuned in. it's sad but true, but Hispanics are more underbanked than everybody else, right? Roughly 1 in 10 households in the US are underbanked, and we can define that a number of ways. I'm defining it here by they have a checking account, they don't have a checking account. You don't have a checking account, you're underbanked. Unfortunately, only 75% of Hispanics have a checking account. So that's 1 in 4 are underbanked, right? It's not that there's no need for it. You can see here, the index line is well above average for lots of financial services, most of them credit related. This is for Hispanics. But most of the time, they're taking these products and services from non-bank financial institutions, things like auto loans, which may be indirect. They don't even know they're dealing with a bank. Student loans, retail credit cards, second mortgages through non-bank lending institutions. So someone's getting the business of Hispanics, the credit lines, the credit business, but mostly it's not banks, mostly. Yep. There's another interesting statistic. 35% of Hispanics households have a prepaid credit card, also known as a debit card. It's not really a credit card at all. It's a debit card. The US number for that is 25%. So Hispanics are indexing more than 40% above average for that. It's a good way to build credit if you don't have any, but it's not really credit, right? Again, it's the unacculturated Hispanics that are, this is where the underbanked segment is, right here. You can see the acculturated and bicultural, it's just below average for have a checking account, but less than half, 46% of unacculturated Hispanics have a checking account. This is where the underbanked, this is what's driving those underbanked statistics among the Hispanic segment. It's all over here, right? It's not just checking accounts. Only 24% of unacculturated Hispanics have any kind of savings account. That's an index of 32, 70% below average. And only 11% of unacculturated Hispanics have a mortgage. It's another one, 70% below average. This is where it's at. This is where the underbanked Hispanics are. They're unacculturated, or less acculturated. So where do Hispanics bank? Well, those that bank tend to bank with the big four. And by the big four, I mean Wells Fargo, JP Chase, Bank of America, and to a lesser extent, Citigroup. Now, some of that is just pure geography, right? These 4 banks have lots of branches, a huge presence in New York and California and Texas and Florida. Those 4 states, they have 60% of the US Hispanic population, 4 states. If you add in Illinois, it's another 4%. Arizona, those 6, they're at 2/3. But the top 4 have 60%, and these banks have lots of branches there. So some of it is because of that. Some of it is just size. They're huge. That's why they're the big 4, right? I mean, Bank of America and JP Chase, they are the primary institution, self-reported, for about 13-14% of all US households. So it's kind of like a big net. Naturally, you're going to get a lot of Hispanics too. You're going to get a lot of everybody. Wells Fargo is interesting. They have less than 11% of US households as their primary bank, but 13.5% of Hispanic households. So that's why they're indexing way up here. They must be doing something right. They must be doing something right. I know they get a lot of bad press, but at the branch level, the marketing level, we're here to talk about marketing, customer service, they're doing something right. I'm just going to show a couple ads here. I can't take credit for any of these. BBDO made these ads and many others like them. They're real quick.
Listo, amor, yo me encargo. ¿Verdad que sí?
Listo, señor Pérez. Gracias por hacer sus transacciones con Wells Fargo.
Gracias.
Hoy vamos a hablar sobre cómo recuperar su figura.
¿Estás listo? Vámonos. Vamos a comer, ¿ah? ¡Sí, gol! ¡Oh, golazo! ¡Gol! Sí, cariño, todo natural. Listo. El cheque. Listo.
Por teléfono, por internet o donde estés, Wells Fargo hace más fáciles tus transacciones bancarias. Y listo.
Okay, that's one. And real quick, we'll do the other one.
Este es Juanjo en su apartamento, al que muchos llaman Hotel Juanjo. Esta es su hermana, sus primos, su mejor amigo. Y este es Juanjo dándose cuenta de que necesita más espacio y decidiendo empezar a ahorrar para su primera casa. Este es JC, dándole sugerencias financieras gratuitas y personalizadas que podrían ayudarlo a ahorrar y a hacer realidad su sueño. Un Hotel Juanjo más grande. Estas son conversaciones sobre el bienestar financiero.
Esto es Wells Fargo.
So I think these ads work. They're not targeted at me, so I'm certainly no expert on it, but I think they work not just because they're in language, but because they're in culture, right? There's kids, there's the extended family, there's the ubiquitous mobile phone and even a tablet in there. And of course, football. I say football, not soccer, right? I lived 20 years in Europe and I learned to say futsal. They're all featured prominently. They're all part of it. They're messaging Hispanics with language and themes that resonate. I can tell you their website runs in Espanol, their app runs in Espanol. You call their customer service line, you can get a Spanish language rep. And at least in Miami, where I live, any branch you walk in, there's Spanish-speaking representatives there ready to help you. They're making a conscious effort to reach and cater to the Hispanic market. And you saw the statistics. They're enjoying success. And in no small part because of the marketing and their customer service. You remember the underbanked cliff that the unacculturated Hispanics fell off of a couple slides earlier. Here it is. Now look at Wells Fargo's Hispanic customers. Okay, there's a little cliff, but they're basically at average, just below. Remember, they were less than half for any bank for being underbanked. This is Wells Fargo Hispanic customers by level of acculturation. They've done an excellent job filling that gap, that underbanked gap right here. And it's paid off. Bicultural Hispanics are also over-indexing for Wells Fargo. It's an effective strategy that they've deployed, targeting unacculturated Hispanics in Spanish with themes, and it's working for everyone except the highly acculturated Spanish market, which is more like the general market anyway. So, what else can we say about Hispanics and their banking habits? Well, clearly they're looking for a bank to reach out to them and speak their language in more ways than one. 18.5% of Hispanic households have been with their current bank less than 3 years, as compared to 12.5% for the US. That's 50% higher. They're switching, they're looking, right? 6 million, our research indicates that almost 6 million Hispanic households switched financial institutions, primary financial institutions in the last 5 years. So that's self-reported, self-identified, that this institution is my primary financial institution. 6 million of them switched in the last 5 years. That's an incredibly high number. And of all the reasons given, it wasn't, oh, this branch is closer to me, or I moved, or they had a better rate. No. Customer service. Customer service, number one reason. No big surprise. Or maybe it is. Of the Hispanics that have a primary bank, 1 in 3 have opened a new deposit account within the last year. That's 36% above average. It's a lot of activity. Over 50% of Hispanic households that have a primary bank have opened a new credit account in the last year. That's an incredible amount of activity. What does this mean? In light of the demographics we talked about, what it means basically, bottom line, Hispanics represent the fastest growing opportunity segment in the market for financial institutions, not just banks, but especially banks. You ignore this segment at your peril. This is where all the growth is. This is where all the growth is going to come from in the future, and the need is clear. It's there. Going to quickly move on and cover some insurance topics. We have another survey that looks at all different kinds of insurance products and services. And without further ado, I want to talk about, so there's one line of insurance that Hispanics are clearly a great target for, maybe even the best target for, and that's auto insurance. Why? Well, Bigger households, more drivers, more cars. 35% of Hispanic households are insuring 3 or more vehicles. 26% of Hispanic households are insuring a driver under the age of 25. Now you might say, well, that's high risk. Well, maybe, but it's also a much higher potential lifetime value. And it's a lot more money. I'll tell you, my teenage daughter, I just took her for her driver's test this week. I had to call the insurance company and add her to my policy. That's mucho dinero. If you're an auto insurer, you want Hispanic households as your customers. More money today and much more lifetime value. There's not a better segment out there to attract. And again, it's the bicultural and monoculturated. That's where the money's at. 83% more likely than the average US household to have a driver under the age of 25, bicultural and monoculturated. These 3 segments right here. 70% of all Hispanic households that have drivers under the age of 25 are bicultural and monoculturated. The old mobile phone is back. We ask a lot of questions about why you switch, why you like your insurer. More than any other group, Hispanics say they would switch or would stay with an insurer who had a mobile device to manage their insurance policy claims. Not just the claims, but manage the policy. 50% of Hispanics, 50% have expressed an interest in using a mobile app to manage their policies and claims. That's an incredibly high number. And where is it coming from? Again, well, it's coming across the board, but the more unacculturated a Hispanic responded it was, the more likely they said they wanted to use a mobile app. And so it better be available in Espanol. Some of that is language. Some of it is just time and convenience, and the fact that the mobile phone is their primary connection to the world, not just to the internet, but to the companies they're doing business with. I can tell you, I looked at this for utilities. We have a utility survey. We looked at it for mobile providers, TV companies, internet companies. They all have that in common. Hispanics, more than anyone, want to deal with their relationships with these companies with an app on their phone in Espanol. Life insurance is another story. Much like Hispanics are underbanked, they're underinsured. And it's not because they can't afford it. The reasons are mostly cultural and psychographic. Less than 36% of Hispanic households have any life insurance whatsoever. That includes life insurance provided through their employer. Why? Well, okay. A lot of them don't like thinking about death. Hispanics are younger on average, and so they don't want to think about that. They're twice as likely to say, I don't have life insurance because I don't like thinking about death. But almost as many said, well, no one ever approached me to buy life insurance. I don't know anything about it. It's too complex. The more unacculturated you are, look at this, the more likely you are to say, I don't understand it well enough, because no one ever explained it. More than half of less acculturated Hispanics say they don't understand life insurance well enough. And that's not their fault. That's the insurance company's fault. We're not approaching them. We're not making it understandable. Okay, 37% of less acculturated say they don't like thinking about death. Fine, don't sell it that way. Sell it this way. More than half of Hispanics say life insurance is an essential tool for retirement and investment planning. And almost half say that they're concerned that they'll outlive their retirement savings, such as it is. Hispanics are also more likely to say that they would go to a seminar to learn about life insurance if it was available in Spanish, and that they're interested in buying life insurance through non-traditional providers if they had the opportunity. And 30% of them say they're getting their information about life insurance from social media networks or blogs. Why? Because no insurers are approaching them to inform them about it. And that's where they get their information. Again, the more unacculturated, the more likely they are to agree that life insurance is essential for retirement planning. 60% of unacculturated Hispanics agree that life insurance is important for retirement planning, and 50% said they're concerned they'll outlive their savings. So it's pretty clear if you're trying to sell life insurance, what you should do, right? Get an app, make sure it's available in Spanish, put together some information that explains life insurance in terms that relate to retirement planning and investment planning, and make it real clear how important that is, and make it easy for them to buy it.